a healthier life. This is CURES.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the CURES Show, where we bring you cutting-edge information on your health from incredible sources. I'm Kara Suntlin. Have you ever been told that all your labs are normal, but you just don't feel quite right or as good as you want to? You're not alone. In fact, your annual blood work might not be enough. Here in studio with us today is Dr. Jennifer Stagg. She is the founder of Whole Health Wellness Center in Farmington. She's also the host of the Natural Doctor Show. She is a naturopathic doctor and integrative physician. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
So I've learned over the years from doing this work that sometimes my regular physical, which I'm good and I go get, doesn't always have all the numbers in the labs that maybe a more integrative physician like yourself would look for to determine not only how am I doing now, but where am I trending?
Yes, right. And to try to catch things early, right? Like that's the whole thing. And so when we think about just kind of general screening, there's a lot more tests that I would think about that really just, we seem a little bit behind the times where it's just, you get the same panel that's been done for 20, 30 plus years and there's not really any updates added onto it. And it's kind of like behind where the science is at this point.
Right, so what we're currently getting is really to detect disease, not measure health. Is that right? So they look and go, oh, your cholesterol's high, or something else is off. But by the time they get to that level in these basic tests, you might have been able to catch it earlier, or you might be actually, by the time it's detected, you're just already sick.
Right, yeah, and just like symptoms that affect the quality of your life. So a lot of women, they're coming into their doctors, men too, saying like, I'm tired, I'm gaining weight, I'm like brain fog, all these symptoms. And especially for women, oh, you're busy, you have kids, run this like basic set of lab work and told you're normal, you're just stressed and busy. Yet if we look at a more complete picture with these sort of like vague complaints that, probably are not some serious disease, but it could be something like they're actually iron deficient, or then even with the standard labs that are on there, the reference ranges are not ideal on there as well. And some of those are actually behind even like regular recommendations from like Endocrinology Society from, a thyroid standpoint, and then you're missing hypothyroid. So these are conditions that could actually be diagnosed through lab work and then more importantly treated, and it could help you to feel better, right? Like, yes, we could be tired because we're stressed and not getting enough sleep, but maybe we could feel better than we do.
Right. And I think a lot of us want optimal health, but commonly missed but important tests could include fasting insulin. So right now, we do get our glucose tested.
Yes.
Okay, so we get a basic, people know, is my A1C good, or is my fasting
and they
glucose?
might not even know that one either. So that's not a part of a standard panel, is to get a hemoglobin A1C either. No. And so but I do see a lot more annual panels coming back that's been added on. But historically, that would be missing as well.
But if you're gaining weight, and you might be missing something if you're not getting an insulin test.
Yeah, absolutely. So insulin, when we think about that, insulin resistance is what we're looking for there. So creeping up higher and higher levels of insulin, showing that those cells are not really responding properly. And it essentially means that you're having more of a carbohydrate intolerance, right? Like you're not processing those starches and sugars well, and it's contributing to weight gain. And it typically starts climbing before you would start to see something like a glucose creep up, right? So you could catch this a lot earlier and address it through dietary lifestyle management for sure.
Okay, so it might even be before, a lot of people are being told they have pre-diabetes.
Yeah, so we can catch it even before that.
Pre.
Okay.
Yes. So let's just say you've got a fasting insulin test. You would have to ask your doctor, could you add this on? And often it will be covered by insurance.
Yes, very routinely covered.
Okay, and then what's your ideal?
Yeah, so then we're looking at below 5, 7 to, that range. And on the reference range that's listed through the lab, typically that range is also too high, which is another thing that I just talked about, how this could be, you could think it's normal and it's coming in as 15 even, because the reference range, some labs are using 19, and that is quite insulin resistant.
Okay, so this is a fasting insulin, and this is something that you would look at the lab, and I guess what you're saying is if you're checking like all of us do now, the little Quest lab, and it says green,
Yes.
it might not be green in the world of someone like yourself who's looking for optimal health or prevention.
Yeah, and even just like keeping up with where the science is on what defines insulin resistance, because it's much lower than like 19 that's listed in the lab.
Okay.
So it needs to get a lot lower than that, and then I mean, if you're a patient, like yes, there are tools like you can use ChatGPT or some AI. You know, a lot more patients are starting to use these AI tools to plug in their lab values to see if they're optimal.
Yeah.
So I'm getting
like or would you caution that?
Well, I think it's a start.
Okay.
And then you could follow that up with like talking to an actual licensed healthcare provider.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
to go there might be something here just because they added on and you're told it's normal, it might not actually be normal.
Right. Okay. So bottom line, because of you and other great docs that I've had access to, I have started to ask my doctor, add this. And sometimes you get a little like, really, you need all that?
Yeah.
Or vice versa, you could see someone in addition to your primary care.
Yeah.
So a lot of people might go to you as their integrative doctor, especially if they're going through perimenopause, menopause, all these things, and their doctor's more of a generalist. They might go for an appointment with you to handle like, how do I fix these other things, even though my doctor says I'm in perfect health?
Right, exactly. Like some of these other symptoms and nutritional deficiencies, and really look at that whole spectrum of what you actually can find a lot of information from blood testing. And so, a lot of patients will come to us and maybe they've just had a panel, or even we have a lot of patients that, they're coming in and their primary care doctor is totally on board with, okay, let's let the naturopathic doctor order all the comprehensive labs, including the ones that are typically run. And then we're getting this big picture, and they're not as interested in looking at all the details.
Right, too much information, or what are we going to do with this?
Yeah.
But there's where, like, more of an integrative doctor like yourself, just to give people a primer.
Yeah.
People will say, oh, is a naturopathic doctor a real doctor?
Right.
And in fact, in other states, not in Connecticut, but in other states, you do prescribe medication, and you did go to medical school.
Right.
It's a different way of learning about health. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. So it's really, root cause prevention, looking at optimal functioning so that we're preventing problems way earlier than, okay, now you're diabetic.
Right.
Right.
Because much harder to reverse.
Yes.
And if you're someone who doesn't want to take a lot of medication or end up on medications that you can't get off of, finding it early and making those lifestyle tweaks now, because sometimes, I guess if you let things go too long, you might have to be on a medication for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there could be so much metabolic damage done when it comes to diabetes, for example. We know we can actually, like, yes, there are genes for diabetes. Even we're talking about type 2 diabetes, adult onset. Some people have, more genetic risk with that, but you actually can completely turn those genes off through lifestyle, through Mediterranean diet. So if we start to see, glucose is starting to creep up, but it's still in normal range, and they're younger, it doesn't really even make sense. Why is theirs creeping up? Likely there's some genetics going on there, but you can basically turn off the genetic expression of those genes that cause diabetes through lifestyle. But once, you've gotten
have the diabetes.
Yes, then it's, there's only so much you can improve it, but you're not going to get them into like a fully
remission.
Unlikely to get into a fully remiss state.
Okay, so let's just say if we got this insulin test, fasting insulin, and you're seeing the numbers don't look great on your end, which you might actually, it's possible your regular doc might not even, number one, they might not order it, but would they read it in the right way?
Well, yeah, because they might be looking at that reference range, right? That is too high. And so then it could still be designated as it's normal, but it's not normal.
So let's say we end up going to Whole Health Wellness or someone who is an integrative naturopathic doctor, and you get the fasting insulin and you don't like the number.
Yeah.
That means, okay, you're eating bread, you're eating pasta, you're probably not metabolizing it very well anymore, which I think a lot of women feel that when they hit middle life.
Very much so.
So what do they start doing to fix it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different things. And so really we're restricting a lot of the starch and sugar not cutting it out, but really reducing portion sizes, combined. There's a lot of science around food combining where you're making sure you have enough protein and fat that slows down the digestion of those carbs so they're not like spiking your blood sugar. And then, yeah, there are botanicals and nutrients that we can also use in terms of supplement. You can't out supplement a poor diet. We always say that, right? It's always diet, lifestyle first, exercise, walking after meals, 10 minutes. There's a lot of different things that you can do to really enhance that insulin sensitivity.
Yeah, the walking after meals, that's starting to make some noise, even on social media.
Yeah.
People are doing squats with their teammates
Yes.
throughout the day. But the idea that if we just ate a carby meal and we move right after,
Right.
it's going to help our insulin response.
Yeah.
So if you are a little faulty in that area, and then you won't probably store it as much fat. It's not
Yes.
just because it's not just calories. It's about, did this insulin response work?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So let's move on to a different test. Ferritin. What is that test? And are you
Yes.
getting that?
Right. So that often is not run. Sometimes you'll see just an iron level on part of a metabolic panel, but mostly a complete iron panel is not routinely run unless someone actually shows up as being anemic from their blood cell counts. So that is something we routinely run and recommend, and ferritin is part of that panel, and ferritin can indicate your iron stores. And just recently, here's another one, meaning like if it's low, again, this reference range, when I'm saying another one, the current reference range needs to be updated because it's much too low. And so even, hematologists are designating we need to move this reference range way up. So like right now it's 5 or something like that. And it should likely be over 50 for women, at least over 30, but probably over 50.
For your ferritin level.
For ferritin, to show that and that would be indicative of an iron like storage. You don't have enough iron stores.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other thing, reverse, because you had me add that test, and my iron stores were bizarrely high.
Right.
So it came out like I should not be having iron in a vitamin.
Exactly. So here's like another instance that a lot of women's vitamins will have extra iron in there. And then, yes, like there are these cases where you can actually start accumulating too much iron as you get older. And then that can cause like iron storage disease where it can actually damage your liver. So if you were taking like a lot of iron and you don't need it over time, it would take a while, but over time it could really cause some trouble.
Okay. So let's just talk about vitamin D also, because vitamin D, you're often hearing, is not just a vitamin now, it's like a hormone for your body. Like every cell in your body needs vitamin D.
Yeah.
I gave it to my whole team here at Channel 3 as a Christmas present last year. They all got vitamin D, some other things too, but especially in the winter. And, I think a lot of doctors are starting to ask for it, but not all. Sometimes I've seen my husband's come back, I'm like, where's your vitamin D? He's like, I don't know.
Right.
I mean, a lot of us, don't know, but if you're someone watching this show and you care about optimal health or you're feeling off, vitamin D might be a basic place to start, and your doctor might say you're fine, but in your world, you might not be.
Again, yes. So this is another great example of a test that's often not run, and then when it is run, the reference range is not ideal. So
They'll say 30 or under.
So 30, basically. That's the cutoff for sufficient level of vitamin D. And again, the science really is showing that your range should be more so 60 to 80. So there's a big difference between, coming in with a range of 30, your number's 33 and you should be 65.
How will you feel? I mean, people say, well, who cares what the number is, but what would you notice when you're low in vitamin D?
Yeah, so sometimes it can be completely like no actual symptoms, nothing that you necessarily feel. And even when you bump those levels up, people could go like, well, I don't feel any differently. Other people, though, can notice a big difference in how they feel in terms of energy is a common one that we'll hear people report, and mood. Yeah, those are the two big ones. But it could be that it's, there are silent problems that it can be causing. So if you have suboptimal levels of vitamin D, it is involved in like blood sugar and insulin metabolism. It's involved in bone density. So here's a silent disease, right, that you don't know until you get a fracture sure you have a bone density test that you actually have low bone density. And vitamin D is really, really like probably the most important thing for our bones.
So if you go buy vitamin D, I know you have recommended, a lot of other doctors I've had on the show recommend that we all, if you live in New England, we're pretty much all deficient without supplementation.
Yeah.
So you've seen that over and over again with blood tests. Like if people aren't taking vitamin D, they pretty much need it, right?
All the time, yeah.
So we take it, do you need to be vitamin DK or do you just get vitamin D? How many units should you start with if you just want an insurance policy right now?
Yeah, so I would say 2,000, and that's sort of like that's a safe level to take. And even the Canadian government just has a blanket statement for adults, take 2,000 without even testing, right?
Okay.
Like this is safe
Other
enough.
governments say, please take this every
and we're
day.
close enough, you know, in terms of geographic to Canada that I would call us like 2,000 is good for us, right?
Yeah.
Now, of course, like if you're spending half the year in Florida, okay, maybe you don't need as much vitamin D as that. And plus, if you're outside and having enough skin exposed, you're not covered in sunblock, because it prevents the ability to make vitamin D, right? So this is where we get into this risk of deficiency living in a more northern climate. But then there are a lot of other variables. So depending on your weight, if you're obese, you typically need a lot more vitamin D. And then there are also genetic factors that influence the amount of vitamin D that you need. So when we're using higher levels of vitamin D, then we're typically, you know, following those patients with lab work and making sure we've got their dosage figured out, like what is going to get you into optimal range. And sometimes that is taking into consideration time of year. So we might have someone on 5,000 for most of the year, and then they get into the summer months and they drop down to 2,000 potentially, right? And then the question about vitamin K, yes, once we start getting into the like slightly higher dosage ranges where we're up in the 2,000, 5,000, there are even patients that really need to take 10,000 a day. Vitamin K is really important at directing calcium where that should go in the body. And so here we need to talk about how vitamin D improves calcium absorption, right? So that's one of the things that vitamin D does. And so we want that calcium to sort of go as our stores being in our bones and not like building calcifications in different areas. So
in your heart or
in your
wherever.
heart or like calcium, like stones and different things like that, calcifications.
Okay, so vitamin D, I know when you have babies, even the regular pediatrician will just say, make sure, you know, especially if you're nursing, that you're giving vitamin D because formula has it, but breast milk doesn't always have enough. So we're told that like from the beginning of life, but we kind of forget. And so that's something good. Now, I don't even know what these tests are. APOB and LP. APOB and LP, what are those and why do we need to ask for that?
Yeah, so we've been running these tests for years, and these have to do with cardiovascular risk. So the first one, this is going to start to sound a little bit like alphabet soup. So the first one is apolipoprotein B. So then that's shortened up, and we'll call it ApoB. Okay, and so that is, if you've ever had, you can do this more comprehensive panel, and we just order this through Quest. So you're just going into your Quest diagnostics and with your other lab work, and you get a cardio IQ panel.
Okay, so you told me to do this, and I asked my regular doctor, my physical, just order the cardiac IQ.
Yes.
So they're already scanning certain things, but the cardiac IQ is going to already run these APOB, LP tests you're talking about. It's just giving like a full picture report card on your heart.
Yes, so it's going to give you a lot more information than just LDL. So ApoB is actually going to tell us how many cholesterol particles would be what are called atherogenic, like they could build plaque. So that's what ApoB is all about.
Okay.
So it's a better indicator to tell us, oh, there's risk here, because some people that have elevated LDL, like they can never have a heart attack. They live well into their 90s and they end up, you know, dying of something else, never had a heart attack, and their cholesterol levels are high. So it doesn't tell the whole picture.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and also, if you have a normal level, but you have some really elevated other kinds of...
Right. There could be other risk factors. So you could have high inflammation. You could have even the insulin resistance and blood sugar. That piece of it also increases cardiovascular risk. So there are all these different factors we need to account for. And then the lipoprotein little a is another one of these other, like it's actually a genetic risk factor that causes you to be a little bit more clot forming, essentially.
Okay. So we want to also, so just ask your doctor for the cardiac IQ if you don't remember the alphabet soup. Okay. What about a thyroid panel? Because I was thinking this is pretty standard, but in fact, I checked my labs and I didn't have much thyroid information. So do men and women need a full thyroid panel?
Yeah, and I would say here's one that it is often on your annual lab work, that you'll have what's called a TSH and a lot of times a T4 along with it, but it might just be a TSH. And that is measuring, is your thyroid overactive? Is it underactive? Women often do get tested more than men for this, so that there is a little bit of discrepancy there, even though we can, all of us can have problems with thyroid disorders. But there's more complete testing that you can do. So you can measure more active thyroid hormone, T3. There are autoantibodies that a lot of people, the number one autoimmune disease is an autoimmune disease of the thyroid called Hashimoto's.
Hashimoto's, okay.
And so sometimes we'll run those antibodies if someone is coming in, they're tired, their thyroid was normal maybe, like they had a TSH run, and they're coming in, they're tired, and their hair is falling out, and they have some muscle weakness, and we can find that their antibodies are quite high, and they, are having this autoimmune reaction against their thyroid, and so they could be more sort of what we call clinical hypothyroid, where it looks like they have enough thyroid hormone and you think they're normal, but they're not normal.
They're not normal.
Yeah.
And there's another test. There's even a test just to run specifically for Hashimoto's,
yes,
right?
Yeah. So there are 2 antibody tests that get run.
So ask your doctor to run the Hashimoto's antibody test, because this comes up from, we had the doctor who founded the Modern Thyroid Clinic on, and she said that's often missed. And she finds a lot of people in her practice with a Hashimoto's diagnosis. And men could have that too?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
More common in women, but men can have it as well.
Okay. So also, once in a lifetime, you want a cardiovascular genetic disease risk factor.
So that was the lipoprotein little a. So, so that is on that cardio IQ profile. So if it is high, it's always going to be high. So that's like 20% of the population that has that. And that does increase your risk of cardiovascular events. But you do a full workup and figure out what else is going on here and how can we just generally lower risk.
Okay, so let's just review here things you're going to ask your doctor. We want to make sure you're getting a vitamin D panel, which might already be on there.
Right.
We want a full thyroid panel.
Yep.
And we want a cardiac IQ.
Yes, and then we want insulin.
Insulin.
For sure.
Fasting insulin.
Insulin, hemoglobin A1C, I think is another one. And then CRP is another big test we think about for inflammation.
So CRP we haven't talked about yet, and I know this sounds very alphabet soup again, but basically you're hearing a lot about how inflammation is the root of all chronic disease, and there is a test that will show you how inflamed you are.
Yep, yeah, exactly.
And it's called CRP.
So it's called CRP, and it will, if you're running that comprehensive cardio IQ test, it is actually built into that panel. So you're going to get a CRP in there.
Just get the cardiac IQ. It's like the Costco of tests.
Totally, yeah.
Has everything in there.
Yes, yeah. And it's minimal cost. So even in terms of, if you're having to pay for a portion of your lab work, they're really good about it. And they might, most people end up with maybe a $20 or $40 extra charge for this very great comprehensive test.
Okay. Yeah. And again, you're already there. You're already getting the blood work. So why not get the full picture?
Yes. Okay. For sure.
So yeah, I as far as I know, when I got my bill from Quest after adding these things on, I didn't notice much of a change.
Yeah.
So there are more specific tests that you might need to get that might not be covered by insurance, and that your doctor honestly might say, go to the naturopath for that.
Right.
A big thing that many people are dealing with gut health issues, right? IBS, all kinds of problems with their gut. And we know that gut microbiome is so important. But it seems that even if you get yourself in to see a gastrointestinal doctor, it can be a long wait, it can be very basic, and you guys deal a lot with that, which you'll be testing food sensitivities, stool tests. Let's just talk about, if someone's out there suffering with some of these digestive malaise, what would you do, and do you need to go to more of an integrative functional doc like yourself for that? Yeah,
so this is a really good conversation. So when we think about referrals to GI and being worked up by GI, we are totally supportive of that. But the purpose of that is to really screen and diagnose disease, right? So now we're looking to rule out things like someone has Crohn's or colitis, or they have colon cancer or esophageal cancer. There's definitely, we really want to support making sure someone's fully screened if they're because sometimes you can have vague digestive complaints and it's something really serious, right? So once the serious things are ruled out, this is where, okay, you're left with a diagnosis of irritable bowel, for example, right? And maybe you're told, just eat a bland diet or whatever, this is nothing serious, or maybe offered some medication, you're still struggling. This is where naturopathic medicine really shines, because it could really be something to do with the microbiome. So where you were bringing up some of these other tests to think about, and we can actually test the microbiome. You can do stool-based testing to see, is there enough of the good bacteria? Is there a lot of what we call diversity? Is there too much overgrowing bacteria? People can have things like SIBO, and that is a test that can also be done at some GI offices, but you can also get kits that you take home. But food sensitivities, food intolerance, there have been a number of studies that have shown that food intolerance testing can actually really significantly improve symptoms in patients who have IBS. And sometimes it could be something simple, like someone needs digestive enzymes, or they just really need a really good quality probiotic, those sorts of things. But you can also...
Is that a blood test?
Well, it's mostly stool-based testing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother level. And so, if you... is there a name of a test you would like people? Because sometimes people just go online and order them, and I don't know if they could obviously come to the Whole Health Wellness Center in Farmington and maybe see a naturopath. But if you just say, I want to get this test, how do I do that? Can they order it without a doctor?
Yeah, there are a lot of direct-to-consumer tests out there now, and there's two different levels that we think about this. So you can do just a microbiome test, and one of my favorite ones out there is by a lab called Biome, BIOHM.
Okay.
So Biome, and this is just a swab, so it's not even a full stool collection. So people prefer they just need to get a little fecal material on a swab. And this is going to measure, do you have overgrowing yeast? That's another thing that can be a problem for people. Do you not have enough of your good bacteria? What's deficient here? This is where you probably, you can get those results, but then you're probably going to need, a knowledgeable healthcare provider to guide you. Okay, what do I even do with this now? But you can go ahead and get that testing done on your own. The next level we think about is a more, it's a stool collection, and we are checking the microbiome, but we're also checking for inflammation in the bowel. We're checking for digestive secretions, like are people making enough pancreatic enzymes? Do they not have enough fat? They have too much fat in their stool. These can be indicators of, not enough bile salts coming through, like more digestive, what we call secretions. If they're going to do those types of tests, usually you need a provider to order those types of tests.
So we only have a minute left. I just want to hit hormones really quick. I know there's so much out there, but should we be getting tested if you're in midlife for hormones? And should you be including testosterone? Does it tell you if you're in perimenopause or menopause, and even if you're on HRT, do you need a hormone test?
Yeah, exactly.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Get testosterone, estradiol, progesterone. It depends if you're still having a period. It depends on where you are in the cycle. And then there are pituitary hormones that can tell us you're kind of like getting close to menopause, or you're in menopausal range, but you can be in that for a little bit before you actually stop having periods.
Bookmark this episode, whether you're watching on the stream or listening on the CURES podcast. We hope you subscribe and support the show. But you can see which test matters to you. Make sure you're asking to get the full picture of your health. Thank you, Dr. Stagg.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone. Thanks for being here for CURES. Have a great day and be well. And if you're on the stream, stay tuned, because Brian Shackman's up next with Eyewitness News Extra.